On this episode of Ultimate Sports Network Interviews, we are joined by artist Chris Brown. We apologize for any technical issues involved in the episode. Please enjoy.
All right, so my name's Chris Brown. I am the artist for the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame and a sports artist. I am a former minor league pitcher, originally drafted by the Cubs and spent some time in their system, and then ended up in some independent league pro leagues, playing with some former major leaguers and some rookies out of college and those kind of things. So it was a interesting league to say the least, but it was very good. Ended up going to Northwestern State University and for my 4-year degree, and it was a art education major. And so I spent some time in different drawing classes and painting classes and those kind of things, really just kind of trying to discover who I was. That told me to, kind of find my niche and find what I was passionate about and what I could identify with to create art of. And so being a college athlete at the time, I knew sports is kind of taking up a lot of my time, and that's really what my focus was. So I just found a way, actually right after college, I found a way to, tie that together. And so I became a sports artist, and I actually love, even to this day, every day I do work, and it's most of the time it's sports related, and I never get bored with it. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I'm able to, with every piece, I'm able to do something a little bit different. And so that kind of keeps it fresh.
And as we talked about, yesterday, we were trying to get an idea of how we were going to do this. That idea of sports and art and that creativity, but it's not necessarily always spontaneous creativity. You have to decide what you're going to do and do it, which, the game is at 2:00. You got to be ready to perform at 2:00. You've got a deadline to get something done. And as we're looking at the piece here off to the side, the Joe Delaney piece, which we'll get to in a minute, it's that kind of translates, doesn't it?
It does. There's preparation important, and as an athlete, especially when you get to be a pro athlete, your preparation becomes, a part of your life, and you learn to plan every single day that way. In fact, you get a little bit of, I don't want to call it anal about it, but you don't want to kind of do mainly just to stay away from people the day I start wouldn't mess up my routine.
Right.
So, as an artist, I've got routines that I do. I'm not superstitious about them like I was with baseball, but just things that I do that I really plan out each piece, and it allows me to see the piece, I was talking about it before, is I'm able to Photoshop everything together and see all the images working together, and if it's going to work, and if it's not, you don't want a figure in the background with its arm kind of coming out of the other figure's head,
right?
Something like that. So you're able to see it and visualize it, with the help of technology before you ever actually begin to pick up a brush or a pencil.
Well, and you hit it. You said the phrase that I was getting ready to use as my technology. Hopefully, it just keeps on going through there. I can hear me just fine, but exactly what I was going to say. You get to the point where your technology allows you to do something that previously, as an artist, you couldn't do. Before, you had to cut and paste and copy and a bunch of stuff. Where now you go Photoshop, boom, boom, boom. Now I have a better idea of what I want this to look like. And now I can visualize it without having to think it or see it. It's actually right there.
Right. And, when I'm doing, portraits, and this allows me to I'll send them what I call a mock-up, and it's what I created on Photoshop. I'll send them a mock-up, and they'll say, yeah, I like this. Can we do something different with that figure in the background? And then I just open it back up and slide it out, and,
right.
I pop a new image in. So it really, really helps with them because they get a real good idea how it's going to turn out.
Now, as we're looking at the Joe Delaney piece, you mentioned something that your connection with him as far as being at Northwestern State, but give me a little bit more, or give our listeners a little bit more of a background to your connection and how there's a little synergy there.
Well, for my whole career, for the most part, and so that there's always connection there. You know how athletes are with their numbers.
Right.
You know, it's kind of our identity, and we just carry that on. I've had nephews that have even used my number when they went through high school. So, you know, they really that an important number to me. So with Joe and I, you know, just I saw the number 37 on there, and I was instantly, you know, drawn to it, and it just kind of gave it a little extra emotional attachment.
Well, as we know from being, you know, former athletes, that, you know, those jersey numbers are our PIN codes and our social security, our you know, password codes and those kind of things. So they're easy to remember because you know them ingrained in your head. In 8th grade, I wore number 12, and then
Right.
5th grade, yeah. So, and as I've mentioned to you as we were talking, you know, I'm not even AFC guy, you know, so the Chiefs would come on in my hometown rarely if they were playing, you know, but Joe Delaney was one of those characters that he kind of, you know, coming from Northwestern State where he wasn't supposed to be a NFL player, you know, and then suddenly
Right.
you're following this guy and you're like, wow, this is more than just your next Pro Bowl player. He's got something going on that's greater than what he's, you know, doing. And then unfortunately, his time of passing, doing something heroic again, you go, okay, I see why this is an important piece. Why is it an important piece for the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame?
Well, this one is actually for Northwestern State University. It's actually in the same town. They're both in Natchitoches, Louisiana.
Okay.
There's a lot of connections there. They do a lot together. But this one, you know, Joe Delaney's already in the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. And unfortunately, he went in before I became the artist, so I didn't get to do his portrait. But you know, the odd thing is, before they even commissioned me to do this piece for the university, I was already looking at pictures of him and going, you know what, he's got a lot of character and it'd be a lot of fun to paint. And so, and then oddly enough, I mean, shortly thereafter, you know, I got a call, and so it's kind of interesting how that came about. But I'm excited about this piece because it's gonna go into the student union in the main entrance there. So the first thing that all the students are going to see that go in there is going to be this painting. So one, it's important that they know Joe and his story, and you know, unfortunately how he passed away in such a heroic way. And then it's important for me because it's my college, and
Right.
Having my artwork in the student union is important for me. So, you know, like I said, when I was in college, I was kind of artistically struggling with an identity. So for me to, you know, to be commissioned by the college at this point to do a painting for them, it just means a lot to me.
That's, you know, that's fantastic. I you know, not to make light of it, but I can't imagine any legacy that I would leave in the student union that I attended at Iowa State University. I don't even want to go to what legacy I'm left here. So now when we're talking about these portraits and these things that you're doing, you mentioned for the, you know, again off the air, but you mentioned, you know, the Ed Reeds and the Peyton Mannings of the world, the Reggie Waynes. What's it like to meet these guys and then to have them be a part of the work, and then again looking at the Hall of Fame, how that plays into all that happens there?
Well, getting a chance. First off, I feel honored when I get to do into the Hall of Famers because everything that they've accomplished. The coolest part of that is getting to talk to them, you know, on the phone first, and you know, emailing back and forth, and then eventually I get to meet them in person and show them their portrait and spend a little time with them. And you know, we have this perception of how people are when they're on TV and
Right.
and those kind of things, and you know, sometimes that's really how they are, and then sometimes that's not how they are at all. So it's really cool to get to meet them. And you know, Ed Reed, and let me put Ed's painting up here real quick.
Okay.
Try to find it. Ed was really, really cool. I mean, just a genuine guy who, appreciated everything that was, being presented to him as far as going into the Hall of Fame and the attention that got, and he gives back all the time, and with his foundation and those kind of things. So it's just really, really cool to get to spend time with him.
That's cool.
And he's still I'd say a regular dude, but he's just a guy that you can sit and talk to, and he doesn't act like he's better than you or anything else. He generally acts interested in who you are.
Well, and what you mentioned is that we tend to forget that we were all just some knucklehead in junior high that suddenly had a dream. Like, oh, we started playing football or basketball or baseball or whatever, and we were a bunch of just knuckleheads that were trying to get there. Some make it, some don't, but that really shouldn't change who you are. Now, obviously, fame and fortune and all that, but again, you've got a guy that arguably one of the best safeties to ever play, but he's just a kid from Louisiana.
Right. Reggie Wayne was the same way. Now, when I met Shaquille O'Neal, he's obviously larger than life in a lot of different ways.
Right.
I've never been around anybody that big before, and I've been around Irving Johnson and Orlando Woolridge and those guys, and they're 7 feet tall, but they don't compare in
right.
sheer
right.
size of Shaq. But I'd never been a big believer in people giving off energy. And I was in the back of the museum, and Shaq arrived. I couldn't see the front entrance, but I literally felt the energy in the room just
right.
change. And
right.
and I said to my wife, I was like, something's going on.
Something's happening here, yeah.
So I left her there, and I went to see what was going on, and I was like, oh man, Shaq just walked in, and everybody got excited about it. And since then I'm like, yeah, I think people do give off an energy.
Yeah.
And that was it was the grand opening of the new museum the year he went in, and so obviously the place was packed. And so when he would literally walk the room, and people would just follow him like a swarm of fish, just everybody tapping him on the shoulder, on the waist really with him, but trying to pay attention, and he did the best he could to kind of accommodate as many people as he could, but in that size of a crowd, it's impossible.
Now, when you're
just really, really neat. When I got to talk to him, I showed him his portrait, and of course there was literally hundreds of people just gathered around, and they were all nice enough. I said, well, hey, can I get a picture with you? And literally everybody moved, and so the picture I have with him, it literally looks like me and him in the room by ourselves, which is pretty cool. And I think I can find that. I usually keep that on my phone.
Okay, while you're doing
that,
I'd love to see that. But while you're doing that, let me ask you this question then. When you find someone like that who's a subject of something you're going to a creation of yours, is it, oh, that is cool? And Kevin Y back there in the back. Now, when like you said, you're not a small person, and all right. Now, when you get, and you can kind of see that energy coming off from there. Now, how do you, or can you, replicate that energy in your art? Or is that a tough thing to do?
It's tough. I mean, if you go back to the Ed Reed picture,
if you go back to the Ed Reed picture, that's just not a photograph. That's got a little bit more oomph to it. So
yeah, that captures a lot of character.
Right.
Let's see.
Is that
so
purposely, or is it just kind of
itself? Kind of when I'm looking at them, I guess when I'm looking at the photographs that I want to work from.
Okay.
And that's kind of why I chose that one. Is that I guess you call it kinetic energy, but when you see, it's like he's about to cut. He's coming up on a. He obviously intercepted the ball, so he was coming up on a opposing player. And you could tell he was about to cut on him or run him over or something.
Right,
so it's got that energy to it. But for me, it was, I saw the detail. I love the Ravens uniforms. And so, you know, I had that great white uniform on, and the ball was really nice and detailed. And so, you know, it just worked really well for me. And so that's why I chose to do it.
Well, you know,
So
it's
nice thing about he signed this one. You don't see the signature on it because I photographed it before, but he was able to sign this 9-time Pro Bowler, which, you know, that's pretty cool.
yeah. I can't say that. That's pretty darn. And again, the Shaq picture, you know, and I see the Kevin Mawae jersey and all that in the background and everything. You start to get all that sense of that history of like, obviously it's a Hall of Fame, so I get that. But how do you? Well, I guess people should know this. Are you the artist for the Hall of Fame?
I am the official artist, yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'm the
Now,
one and only.
That has a lot of cachet, but a lot of responsibility too, doesn't it?
It does. They had pretty much the same artist for, well, it was a husband and wife, and they kind of split duties, and they did that for 50 years, the first 50 years of the Hall of Fame. And so they really had they had their style ingrained in the Hall of Fame. And then I took over in 2009, and instantly for me, it was, you know, I didn't want them to be forgotten, but I definitely wanted to make a mark pretty quick. And they kind of had this style where it was just a head and shoulder shot, and that was about it. You know, there wasn't a whole lot to the background usually. And for me, it was, if somebody walks through the Hall of Fame and they see their face, they may not know them necessarily.
Right.
You know, they don't know the like. So I want them to be able to see in the background, oh, they played football, or oh, they were into car racing, or or Freddie Spencer was a motocross racer. So
Right.
and that funny, I would bring up Freddie Spencer, because he was the first one where I kind of went out on a limb, because they told me you need to kind of stay with tradition. We just kind of want to do this, and I was like, there's no way I can do Freddie Spencer and not put a motorcycle somewhere on there.
Yeah.
So I kind of risked it a little bit. I went on a risky, it's kind of like throwing a changeup on a 3-2 count. I went ahead and put him on his motorcycle in the background and had him kind of turn it into the portrait. And fortunately for me, the board loved it, and ever since then, that's the direction we go if we can help it.
Yeah, sometimes you got to pitch backwards, huh?
Yeah, got to get them off balance.
That's fantastic. But you bring up an interesting point, though, because having that experience, that being traditional only works so far. Every now and then you've got to do something a little bit different, especially when everyone's expecting you to do one thing. And if
right.
as anyone has said, if you're throwing 98, but they know you're throwing 98, they're still going to hit it. You've got to be able to get, unless you're Mariano Rivera and throwing the same, but that's not true entirely. But if there are only so many pitchers to get away with one pitch, and if they know it's coming, it doesn't get hit. So to me, that's pretty impressive. You go, okay, I'm just gonna. That's a nice way of looking at things. Like, I'm going to change it up a little bit because I know this is going to work and it's a little bit different. So now when we're looking at the Hall of Fame and then what you provide to that, how often do you have to commission or do they commission a piece from you?
So for the Hall of Fame, I actually do. Usually it's 8 inductees every year. Every once in a while they'll add a 9th. They do it like a voting thing, and so the board will get together and they will vote in at least 8. So, and then there's a Dave Dixon Award winner, which is they bring something to sports without being necessarily a player or a coach. And there's been quite a few of those, and so I'll do their portrait every year also. So it ends up being at least 9, sometimes 10 portraits every year for them.
And is it something where you can say, okay, I have this group of 8, and I have between the voting and the revelation and then the actual, here's the ceremony, how long do you have to get those done usually?
Well, a lot of times it's it kind of fluctuates because the board has to meet, and getting them all together from all over the state of Louisiana sometimes is a little difficult. So because they're all involved in sports, and they're sports writers, most of them, and so they're covering sports, all the time. So to get some time where they're not covering a sport becomes kind of difficult. And so they manage to meet usually sometime between September, October, sometimes November. And so once they've met, immediately, they send me the list and the contacts, and I wait until Doug Ireland contacts them and tells them that they're in, because I certainly don't want to be the first contact in that sense. That's above my pay grade. So, so once they say yes, you can contact them, then I'll get a hold of them, and I'll start from there. And really, it takes a lot longer to get them to decide on a mock-up than it does for me to actually do the painting.
Well, and it's when you went back and you mentioned getting ready for a start, and every 5 days or however it would work for you, it's kind of that, okay, now I'm going to put my routine together for this picture. Now I'm going to put my routine together for this medium. I'm not, so if you've got 8 of them to do, like you said, it probably takes longer to get the actual idea together than it does to do it. So you've got an idea of what you're going to do, and then once you've committed to it, what is the feel to it? Because we've talked about, again, the idea of performance as opposed to the idea of awareness or how you put it together. What are you in performance mode at that point? It's like, okay, we've decided what we're going to do. Now I'm in performance mode.
Yeah, it pretty much becomes game time right there.
Yeah.
When I actually sit down with the pencil and I'm ready to go, I don't want to be bothered. I don't I don't want anything else going on, and that's tough sometimes, but that's why I guess you have a studio space.
Right.
You can go in and shut the doors and lock them, and people can leave you alone. But it's exciting time for me. It's like you practice for a game, and then you finally get to pick up the ball and face a hitter. All the preparation is now paid off. Now it's time to go have some fun.
And the lights come on, and let's do it. Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, now.
And then too, and I used to get a little nervous about them. I got some students. I tell them, if you think turning an assignment to me is nerve wracking, try showing Shaquille O'Neal his painting for the first time. But, so I was like, that can be stressful. Or when somebody's paying you a lot of money,
Right.
it's got to be perfect. It's not something that can be close. And so I used to stress a little bit over it, and then it's kind of that same thing. That's the baseball thing kind of took over, where it didn't matter for me how big the game was. Once I stepped on the mound, I didn't think about how big the game was. I just thought about the strikes and executing those kind of things.
And I'm just going to perform to the best of my ability, and whatever happens from there happens from there. Right.
That's right.
And now you were talking about something, the idea of taking sports art to a grander scale or to a larger scale. And I know that that's something that's kind of in the infancy right now, but give everybody an idea of what you meant by that.
So I kind of look at the different galleries and museums and those kind of thing, and my artwork's in a museum. It's the Hall of Fame itself is a museum. But when you look at art galleries and the art community itself, if you were to even pick up art magazines, you're not going to see a whole lot of sports art, if any.
Right.
And a lot of the galleries will really kind of snub their nose at it. And my thing is why? Because of the subject matter. I find sports a lot more interesting than a bowl of fruit, and you do see bowls of fruit in galleries and museums and things. So my thing is to kind of break through that little barrier and get people to start to understand that sports art has a lot of beauty to it. The human form itself is something that's been celebrated for a long time, and our culture now is intertwined with sports and these athletes, and it should be on display. not only just because it's sports, but because of the beauty of the actual painting and the work that's gone into it.
Well, the only thing that I can think of that has been quote unquote mainstream was Leroy Neiman, or was it Bill Russell way back when that bounced the ball like did a Jackson Pollock kind of thing, and he asked himself that question. A lot of the patrons and the benefactors of these art museums are also people who are owners or participants in sports franchises. So it seems only logical you could be able to combine the two. So we should do something to get that done.
Absolutely.
Platform
And
for
there's,
both of them.
Yeah, that would be awesome. There's sports artists that are out there, and it's kind of funny is you feel like some of them are kind of like, they got your back kind of thing, and then some of them are kind of competing against you,
right?
Which is kind of interesting. And you see some of their work, and you start to think, well, am I better than that person? Is my artwork better than that? And that kind of drives you a little bit too. So I wouldn't say I have any sports artists that are friends per se, but we're connected in a lot of different ways on social media and those kind of things. And if I see a good painting by somebody on there, I certainly tell them, hey, that's really, really good.
Right.
Tell them what I like about it. Support them that way. If somebody gets a big commission or they land a good gig, I'm probably the first one to tell them congratulations. So there's a community out there for sure. So if somebody breaks through that, I'd like to be the first one to break through that barrier, obviously, but it would definitely open up an avenue for a lot of different artists.
Well, I would look at it as if you were to win the Cy Young, but the runner-up, his ERA was like a 5.2. Well, they had to give it to me because the other guy just, there was no one else there. But if you're at a 2.6 and there are 5 other guys at a 2.75, you're like, okay, I really pitched my butt off this season. I earned this. So yeah, I think that, and again, going back to the sports thing, it's the competition I think makes us better, and I think the realization of, as you said, am I better? Well, I did pretty darn good because these guys were pretty darn good as well.
Right.
Yes, we can get some more exposure to everything.
There's things I do in my artwork, like how I create the backgrounds and how I mix the different mediums that don't actually mix. You know what I'm saying? I mean, using acrylic paint and Prismacolor on the same, colored pencil on the same piece. I had to figure out a way to do that, and so that's not something I'm willing to share with everybody.
You've got to.
It took me years to figure out my style and how to do it and how to make things work. And so there are just certain things where I'm like, well, I'm not telling you that.
Right. So, yeah. This is mine. Well, that's what makes you unique. So cool. Well, if you will,
think about Greg Maddux, right? Greg Maddux had all that great movement. He had that ball that would run back across to a righty.
Yeah.
Well, he wouldn't tell people how he did that until after he retired.
Right. And he left that up to Mike to be the pitching coach because he's like, pitching coach, maybe I'm not so good at, but they left his brother to do that. Las Vegas guys we're talking about there. So yeah, well, we could get into that all day. That staff was just insane. But they, between Maddux and Smoltz and Glavine, 3 different types of pitchers that got the job done, but you wouldn't want to you face 3 different guys back to back to back. So if you prepared for one, you weren't prepared for the other, and you weren't prepared for the other one, and then add in, Steve Avery, whoever you want to add in after that, you go, wow, this is insane. Then bring in the bullpen. So if they needed the bullpen. So I see what you're saying, that, this is how I do things, and equally as well, but different as someone else. So, and I think that's what, I believe that's what the sports background gives us all, is that, you are able to take something that maybe other people see as cookie cutter and then put your own spin on it. So it's just a little bit different and makes it that much more special. So again, I've seen just a few of the pieces, and I can see, and I'm not a trained art person by any stretch of the imagination, I can see that, like every piece that's sitting there off to the side, I can say I've never seen that before. I can say that that's
Right.
the energy, and I'm taken by the eyes, because like you said, you're looking at the next move. He's already making one move, but he's looking at the next move. You can see that coming through, and that to me is just impressive. And again, the Joe Delaney piece was just it gives you the essence of that. I don't want to say heroism, but that you get a feel of who the guy is or what he's about, and that's that, as you said, that's not a bowl of fruit.
Yeah, there's a lot more to it, right? That has that human connection to it.
Well, and that's what sports is all about. Well, here's what we talked about, and we'll try and continue to do this as the next group of inductees come up, and as you're looking at doing things on a more of a larger scale, getting the galleries and things like that. We'll continue to talk about things and show some more pieces and get some more ideas of what's going on, if that's okay with you.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I'd appreciate that.
And I'll actually have an internet connection that actually works for more than 13 seconds at a time. And we'll make that work as well. So, I apologize for that. It's just, you can't control these things. So unfortunately, but again, it's like, rain delay. Oops. Well, you got to power on. So, all right. Well, Christopher, I really, it's been first of all, as a lover of what's going on, but not an expert on things, which I am for most things. It's always nice to get more perspective and to talk to people who do things. Yep. And we talk about off the air, to be able to say, okay, I was this, and I still am at heart as far as being a pitcher. That's never going to go away. I know that. But you're able to transition to something else and find a passion for that, and to be able to relay that passion as well. So I think that's something, as we've talked about some of the shows we're doing, now people have to understand it's great to be passionate about sports, and it leads you to something else, not just playing sports. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
No problem. Oh, if you would, before we close out, tell people where they can find you, the Hall of Fame and Twitter accounts and that kind of stuff.
So if you want to go to the Hall of Fame site, it's just Google Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, and their site will come up. There is a link on there for my site, but my site is chrisbrownsportsart.net. Also the same thing on Twitter. I think my Twitter is cbrownsportsart, and then I'm on Instagram, Chris Brown Sports Art, and Facebook and all that kind of thing. So really the key phrase is Chris Brown Sports Art. You can find me.
Sounds good. Again, thanks again. We see some stuff in the background. I know you mentioned that you wanted to get more of a studio-based kind of a theme of this, so we'll work on that in the future and make sure we kind of see maybe a work in art, a work in progress as you're going. So we'll go from there.
Right.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Awesome.
I appreciate it. Okay.